He wasn't building a shed. He was guarding something the world had already forgotten, and nobody on Maple Street could see it except the dog. The laughter came first, light and careless, drifting over picket fences and trimmed lawns as Daniel Hayes hammered warped boards into place behind his sagging house. The kind of laughter people use when they think they understand everything. When they believe a man's worth can be measured by the paint on his walls or the car in his driveway. Daniel didn't look up, didn't answer, just drove each nail with the same steady rhythm he once used in places far from here. Places no one on this quiet street would ever truly understand. His hands were rough, his movements precise, like every inch of that crooked structure mattered more than it should, and beside him, always within arm's reach, stood Rex, a 5-year-old German shepherd with a dark sable coat and amber eyes that never rested. The dog didn't watch the neighbors, didn't react to the mocking voices or the phones raised to capture another clip of the crazy vet. Instead, Rex kept his gaze fixed on a single patch of ground beneath the rising frame, ears twitching, nose low, as if the earth itself was speaking to him in a language only he could hear. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the yard, catching dust in the air, turning each floating speck into something almost sacred. Daniel paused once, just once, leaning on the handle of his hammer as he glanced toward Rex, not questioning, not correcting, just acknowledging, like two soldiers sharing a silent understanding, the kind that doesn't need words. A neighbor across the fence shook his head, muttering something about wasted time and lost causes. Another chuckled, louder this time. "You planning to live in that thing, Hayes?" The words hung there, sharp but empty. Daniel didn't respond. He never did. Because some battles aren't meant to be explained, only endured. The scent of cut wood mixed with the faint trace of rust in the air, a smell that clung to memory more than the present. Rex shifted slightly, placing one paw directly over the same spot he had guarded since morning, his body still, alert, as if marking a boundary no one else could see. A breeze rolled through the yard, carrying distant sounds of a passing truck, a screen door slamming, ordinary life continuing without pause. But beneath that normal rhythm, something felt off, something quiet and waiting. Daniel drove the final nail of the day, just as the sky began to fade into a pale blue-gray. He stepped back, studying the shed, uneven, unfinished, unimpressive to anyone looking from the outside. But his eyes didn't judge it the way others did. They measured something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. Rex moved closer, brushing against his leg, and for a brief moment, Daniel's hand rested on the dog's head, fingers pressing gently into thick fur, grounding himself in the only thing that had never wavered, never doubted, never laughed. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting soft halos across the quiet neighborhood. Windows lit up with warm yellow glow, families settling into dinner, into comfort, into certainty. But in the backyard of that forgotten house, the air held a different weight. Rex lay down again, exactly where he had been all day, chest against the dirt, ears alert, eyes open, not sleeping, never fully resting, guarding something unseen. And Daniel, standing in the dim light, looked down at that spot for a long moment, longer than anyone watching would understand, as if he already knew what the world would only begin to discover when the night finally spoke. Morning does not bring answers, it brings eyes, and by sunrise the shed has already become a quiet spectacle again. The same neighbors stepping out with coffee mugs and folded arms, watching from a distance like they are observing something that does not quite belong. Daniel Hayes is already outside before most alarms finish ringing, sleeves rolled, breath steady in the cool air that still carries a hint of last night's damp wind. Rex is there too, exactly where he had been, as if time never moved for him, his body pressed low against that same patch of ground, ears flicking at sounds no one else notices. Daniel does not greet anyone, does not react to the murmurs drifting across the fences. He simply kneels beside the shed and runs his hand slowly over the wooden planks, checking them not for strength, but for something deeper, something only he seems to measure. A man from 2 houses down lets out a soft chuckle, shaking his head as he says something about wasted mornings and pointless work. Another voice joins in, quieter but sharper, wondering out loud how long before the city steps in to deal with the eyesore. Their words float through the air like dust, landing nowhere that matters, because Daniel does not hear them the way they expect. Or maybe he does, and he just refuses to carry them. Rex shifts slightly, nose pressing closer to the soil, inhaling slowly, deliberately, then pausing as if listening for a response from beneath the surface, the kind of stillness that makes even the wind hesitate. Daniel watches him, not with confusion, but with recognition, like this is not new, like this has been happening long before anyone else started paying attention. A faint memory moves across his face, subtle, almost invisible, the kind that does not show itself fully in daylight, just enough to remind him why he never told Rex to stop, why he never filled that spot with concrete or covered it with boards. The shed is not centered the way it should be. Anyone with a measuring tape would see it, one side slightly offset, leaving that small, deliberate gap beneath the floor, as if the structure was built around something instead of over it. A choice no one else understands. A choice no one else was meant to understand. The sun climbs higher, casting sharper lines across the yard, revealing imperfections in the wood, the uneven nails, the weathered edges. Every detail that fuels the quiet judgment from across the fence, but none of it touches the reason Daniel is still here, still building, still waiting. Rex suddenly lifts his head, not in alarm, but in awareness, his eyes locking onto the shed floor, then shifting to Daniel for a brief second, just long enough to pass something unspoken between them. Daniel exhales slowly, the kind of breath that carries weight, not fear, not doubt, just readiness. He stands and walks toward the back door, leaving the tools where they are, leaving the shed unfinished for another day. Because whatever matters is not in the wood, not in the nails, it is beneath, and it is not ready yet. Inside the house, the air feels different, quieter, like the walls remember more than they show. Daniel moves through it without hesitation, reaching a small drawer near the kitchen, opening it with careful fingers. Inside rests a single object, worn, metal, marked by time. He does not pick it up right away. He just looks at it, as if confirming something he already knows. Outside, Rex does not move, not even when a car passes, not even when a neighbor calls out to someone across the street. He stays locked to that one place, guarding it with a patience that feels older than the house itself. And somewhere beneath the stillness, beneath the dirt and the quiet weight of years, something waits, not lost, not forgotten, just buried, holding its breath for the moment. It will finally be seen. By late afternoon, the street has settled into that familiar rhythm of routine and distance. But something beneath it has shifted, subtle, almost invisible, like a note played too low for most ears to catch. Daniel stands at the edge of his yard with that same quiet stillness, the kind that makes time feel slower around him. And inside his hand now rests the object he did not take earlier, a worn pair of military dog tags. Edges dulled, surface scratched by years that did not pass gently. They hang from his fingers with a weight that is not measured in ounces but in memory. Rex notices immediately, lifting his head with a sharp focus, his body rising from the ground as if called by something deeper than sound. His gaze locks onto the tags, then flickers back to the earth beneath the shed, and for the first time since morning, he lets out a low breath, not a growl, not a warning, but something closer to recognition. Daniel kneels beside him, lowering the tags just inches above the dirt, and the air between them tightens, as if the space itself understands what is about to unfold. The neighborhood noise continues in the background, distant laughter, a lawn mower humming 2 houses down, a screen door closing. But here, in this small patch of land, everything feels held in place, suspended between past and present. Daniel presses the tags lightly into the soil, not burying them, just letting them touch. And Rex leans forward, nose brushing the metal, inhaling deeply, then pausing, his body going completely still, the way it does when he knows something matters, really matters. Daniel's eyes soften, but there is no relief in them, only confirmation, the kind that answers a question he has been carrying for far too long. A flicker of memory crosses his face again, stronger this time. A desert horizon, heat rising in waves, voices carried over radio static, a moment that never fully left him, only buried itself deeper with each passing year. And now, somehow, it has found its way back to the surface through a dog that never forgot, never questioned, never stopped listening. Rex suddenly shifts, stepping back once, then forward again, circling the spot with precise, deliberate movements, not random, not frantic, but exact, as if tracing something invisible etched into the ground. Daniel watches closely, following each step, each pause, each small adjustment, his breathing steady but heavier now, like a man standing on the edge of understanding. Across the fence, someone calls out again, louder this time, asking what he thinks he is doing, but the words feel distant, irrelevant, like echoes from another world. Daniel does not respond, because whatever is happening here does not belong to them, does not need their approval. Rex stops abruptly, placing both front paws firmly onto one exact point beneath the shed's edge. His ears lift, his head tilts slightly, and then he looks up at Daniel, not with urgency, not with fear, but with certainty, the kind that does not ask, it tells. Daniel exhales slowly, the dog tag still in his hand, his thumb brushing over the engraved letters worn by time. He does not speak, because there is nothing to say that would make this clearer. Some truths are not spoken, they are uncovered, and as the light begins to fade again, stretching shadows across the uneven boards of the shed, Daniel reaches for the first tool within reach, not with hesitation, not with doubt, but with the quiet resolve of someone who finally knows where to begin. And beneath them, just inches below the surface, something long hidden waits patiently, as if it has been listening all along, waiting for the one moment when memory, loyalty, and time would finally meet in the same place. Night does not fall all at once, it settles slowly, like a quiet agreement between light and shadow, and by the time the last trace of sun disappears behind the rooftops, Daniel is already beneath the unfinished shed, the wooden boards above him creaking softly as the temperature drops. The air smells of damp earth and old timber, thick and grounding. Rex stands just outside the narrow opening, his silhouette outlined by the faint glow of a porch light from the neighboring yard, his eyes fixed on Daniel with an intensity that never wavers. Daniel's hands move carefully now, no longer building, but uncovering, each movement deliberate, respectful, as if the ground beneath him deserves more than force. The first few inches give way easily, loose soil shifting under his fingers, but deeper down, the texture changes, firmer, untouched for years, maybe longer. He pauses for a moment, not from exhaustion, but from something else, something closer to recognition, like reaching the edge of a memory that has waited too long to be seen again. Above him, a faint murmur drifts from beyond the fence, voices lowered but present, curiosity growing stronger than mockery now. A couple of neighbors linger longer than usual, drawn by the quiet persistence of a man who refuses to stop. Rex hears them, his ears flick once, but he does not turn, he does not leave his post, because whatever is happening here matters more than anything beyond that yard. Daniel exhales slowly and continues. The sound of metal scraping lightly against soil breaks the stillness, soft, unmistakable. He freezes, not in fear, but in certainty, the kind that settles deep in the chest before the mind catches up. His fingers brush against something solid, cold even through the dirt. He clears around it carefully, revealing the edge of a surface that does not belong to the earth, flat, structured, human-made. The breath he takes now is different, heavier, as if the past itself has just reached up and touched him. Rex steps closer, lowering his head to the opening, his nose hovering just above Daniel's shoulder, breathing in the scent that has been calling him all along. Daniel shifts his weight, widening the space around the object, the soil falling away in quiet layers, until the shape becomes clearer, a corner, then a side, then the faint outline of something rectangular. Buried not by accident, but by intention, the night air grows colder, wrapping around them, carrying a silence that feels almost sacred, the kind that asks for patience. Daniel brushes away the last layer of dirt from the top surface, revealing worn metal, dulled by time, edges softened, but still unmistakably intact. He does not pull it out yet, does not rush the moment. Instead, he places his hand flat against it, fingers spread, feeling the weight of what lies beneath, not just the object, but everything it carries with it. Above, a car slows as it passes, headlights sweeping briefly across the yard, illuminating Rex's steady form, the half-built shed, and the man kneeling in the earth like he is listening for something only he can hear. The light fades as quickly as it came, leaving them in shadow again. Daniel closes his eyes for a brief second, not in hesitation, but in acknowledgement, then opens them with a quiet resolve. He grips the edge of the metal and begins to lift, slowly, carefully, as if time itself might break if he moves too fast. The soil resists at first, holding on to its secret, but then it gives, inch by inch, the object rising into the night air for the first time in years. Rex lets out a soft breath, almost like relief, and for a moment, everything else fades. The neighbors, the house, the world beyond this yard, leaving only a man, his dog, and the truth they are finally bringing back into the light. The metal case is heavier than it should be, not because of its size, but because of everything it carries with it. Daniel lifts it fully from the ground and sets it gently on the dirt beside him, his hand steady but slower now, as if each second matters more than the last. Rex lowers himself immediately beside the case, his body pressed close, not touching, just guarding. His amber eyes locked onto it with a focus that feels almost human. The night air wraps around them, cool and still, holding its breath as Daniel brushes away the last clumps of soil from the surface, revealing faint markings worn down by time, edges softened, corners dulled, but still unmistakably military. His fingers trace along the lid until they find the latch, small, rusted, reluctant. He pauses again, not from uncertainty, but from respect, because some things are not meant to be opened quickly. Some truths require a moment of silence before they are seen. Above the yard, a porch light flickers on from across the fence, casting a dim glow that stretches just far enough to touch the edge of the shed. Someone is watching, maybe more than one, but their presence feels distant, secondary, like background noise to something far more important unfolding here. Daniel exhales slowly and presses the latch. It resists at first, a quiet protest from years of being left alone. Then with a soft click it gives, the sound barely louder than a breath, but enough to echo in the stillness. Rex shifts slightly, his ears lifting, his body tightening for a brief moment, then settling again, as if he has been waiting for that exact sound. Daniel lifts the lid carefully, inch by inch, the hinges creaking softly, revealing darkness inside at first. Then shapes begin to form as his eyes adjust. Cloth, folded tight, preserved despite time. Beneath it, the faint outline of something rigid, structured, familiar. His hand hesitates just above it, hovering, not quite ready to touch, because he already knows, or at least part of him does. He reaches in slowly and lifts the top layer, revealing a neatly folded American flag. Its colors muted but intact, protected from everything that tried to erase it. Daniel's breath catches, not sharply, but deeply, like something long buried inside him has just been called back to the surface. Rex lowers his head slightly, his nose brushing the edge of the case. Then the fabric, inhaling the scent that still lingers, faint but present, a trace of a place far from here. Daniel sets the flag gently aside, his movements careful, almost reverent, and beneath it lies what he had not allowed himself to fully remember, a second set of dog tags, cleaner than the ones in his pocket, but marked in the same way time marks everything. He picks them up, holding them between his fingers, the metal catching the dim light. And for a moment, everything else fades. The yard, the shed, the watching neighbors, all of it disappears, leaving only a memory that no longer stays quiet. A voice carried through heat and distance, a promise made and never fulfilled, a moment where something was left behind, not by choice, but by circumstance that never gave him the chance to return. Rex lets out a soft sound, barely audible, more breath than voice, but enough to anchor Daniel back to the present. He looks down at the dog, their eyes meeting in a way that does not need explanation, because whatever this is, whatever has been uncovered tonight, Rex already knew. He always did. Daniel reaches back into the case and finds one more item, a small, sealed envelope, edges worn but intact, his name written across the front in faded ink, the letters unmistakable, written by a hand he has not seen in years but could recognize anywhere. His fingers tighten slightly around it, not enough to damage it, just enough to feel that it is real, that this is not something imagined or dreamed into existence. The air shifts again, A light breeze moving through the yard, carrying the faint sound of someone whispering from beyond the fence. But Daniel does not turn. He does not acknowledge them, because this moment does not belong to anyone else. He opens the envelope slowly, carefully, as if the paper itself might carry more than words. And as the first edge of the letter slides into view, his breath slows, his shoulders settle, and something inside him, something that has been waiting longer than he ever admitted, begins to finally, quietly, come back to life. The paper feels thinner than he remembers letters should feel, fragile but steady in his hands, and as Daniel unfolds it slowly, the faint sound of the crease echoes louder than it should in the quiet night. Rex remains still beside him, close enough that Daniel can feel the warmth of his body through the cool air, as if anchoring him to the present while something else begins to pull him backward. The ink on the page is faded but clear enough. Each letter carefully written, deliberate, the kind of handwriting that carries intention, not haste. Daniel's eyes move across the first line and then stop, not because he cannot read, but because he understands too quickly, because recognition arrives before comprehension has time to catch up. His breath shifts, slower now, deeper, like a man stepping into water he knows is colder than it looks. The sounds of the neighborhood have softened into distant hums. A car passing far away, a dog barking somewhere down the block. But here, in this small space beneath the unfinished shed, everything feels sealed off, like a room inside memory where time no longer moves forward. Rex lowers his head slightly, resting it near Daniel's knee, his ears still alert, but his posture calmer, as if whatever he had been waiting for has already begun to unfold. Daniel continues reading, his eyes tracing each line with care. And though the words are not spoken aloud, they carry weight, not of sorrow, not of regret, but of truth that was never meant to be hidden forever. The letter speaks in a voice he knows, steady, grounded, familiar in a way that reaches past years and distance. It does not accuse, it does not explain too much. It simply tells, piece by piece, what was left unsaid, what was buried not just in the ground, but in silence. Daniel's fingers tighten slightly on the edge of the paper, not enough to crease it, just enough to hold on to something that feels like it might slip away if he does not. A breeze moves through the yard again, brushing lightly against the edges of the shed, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and wood and something older, something that does not belong entirely to this place. Rex exhales softly, a quiet sound that seems to match the rhythm of Daniel's breathing, and for a moment, it feels as if the two of them are reading the letter together, understanding it in different ways but arriving at the same truth. Daniel reaches the final lines and pauses, his eyes resting there longer than necessary, as if giving those words the space they were always meant to have. Then slowly, carefully, he lowers the paper, not folding it yet, just holding it in his hands as he looks down at the case, at the flag, at the second set of tags. Everything laid out in front of him like pieces of a story that was never finished. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full, filled with something that settles deep in the chest, not loud, not overwhelming, just steady, like a quiet answer finally finding its place. Rex shifts slightly, pressing closer now, his presence firm, certain, as if reminding Daniel that he is not alone in this moment, that whatever has been uncovered here does not belong only to the past. Daniel lifts his gaze for the first time in several minutes, looking out beyond the shed, beyond the fence, toward the houses that once felt so distant from him, their windows glowing softly in the night. Unaware of what has just been brought back into the world, he does not speak, does not call out, because this is not a moment for words. It is a moment for understanding, for acceptance, for something quieter than either. And as he finally folds the letter with careful hands and places it back into the case beside the flag and the tags, there is a subtle shift in him, not dramatic, not visible to anyone watching from a distance, but real, something that has been held tight for too long, loosening just enough to let him breathe differently. Rex lifts his head again, eyes steady, watching Daniel with that same unwavering focus, and in that shared silence, something unspoken passes between them, not a question, not a command, but a simple, undeniable truth that neither of them needs to say out loud, because they have both known it all along. The night does not end with revelation. It lingers, stretching the moment into something that refuses to be rushed, and Daniel remains there beside the open case long after the letter has been folded, his hand resting lightly on the worn metal as if grounding himself in something real, something undeniable. Rex shifts closer again, his body now leaning gently against Daniel's side, not demanding attention, just present, steady, a silent witness to everything that has surfaced. The air has grown colder, carrying a faint chill that brushes against the back of Daniel's neck. But he does not move to go inside. Not yet, because leaving now would feel like closing something that has only just begun to open. Instead, he reaches for the second set of dog tags again, lifting them slowly, turning them just enough for the dim light to catch the engraved name, the letters worn but still legible, and as his thumb traces over them, a memory returns more clearly this time, not fragmented, not distant, but whole, a voice that once stood beside him, steady and certain, a presence that did not fade easily. And for a moment, Daniel's posture shifts, his shoulders straightening slightly, as if responding to something unseen. Rex watches him closely, ears forward, eyes steady, sensing the change not in what Daniel does, but in what he carries. Beyond the fence, a door opens somewhere, followed by the low murmur of voices. Curiosity no longer hidden, a shadow pauses near the edge of the yard, watching, waiting, but still not stepping closer, because something about this moment feels different now, heavier, like a line has been drawn that no one dares cross. Daniel lowers the tags back into the case, placing them beside the folded flag with careful precision, then closes the lid halfway, not sealing it, just enough to hold everything together, as if acknowledging that the past does not need to be hidden again, only respected. Rex lets out a soft breath and finally sits, his body relaxing for the first time since the digging began. The tension that held him alert all day easing into something calmer, something resolved. Daniel notices, his hand moving instinctively to rest on Rex's neck, fingers pressing gently into the thick fur, and for a brief moment, his eyes close, not in exhaustion, but in something closer to peace, the kind that arrives quietly, without announcement, and settles where it is needed most. The wind moves again, slightly stronger now, brushing against the shed, causing one loose board to tap softly against another, a small, hollow sound that echoes just enough to remind him of what this place was meant to be, not a shelter from the world, but a marker, a way to remember something that should never have been left behind. Daniel opens his eyes and looks around the yard, really looks this time, at the uneven grass, the worn fence, the distant glow of houses that once felt so separate from him. And something shifts again, subtle but real. The distance does not feel as wide anymore, not because anything around him has changed, but because something inside him has. He reaches down and pulls the case fully out from beneath the shed, setting it on the ground beside him, no longer hidden, no longer buried, just present, exactly where it belongs now. Rex stands again, stepping closer, his nose brushing lightly against the metal before he looks up at Daniel, waiting, not for a command, but for whatever comes next. Daniel does not speak, but he nods once, a small, almost imperceptible movement, as if agreeing with something only the two of them understand. And then, slowly, he begins to rise, not leaving the moment behind, but carrying it with him, step by step, into whatever comes after. While behind them, the shed stands unfinished, its purpose no longer what anyone thought it was, its meaning changed in a way no one on that street could have imagined. And in the quiet space between what was hidden and what is now seen, something settles into place, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the kind of certainty that does not need to be announced to be real. Morning arrives without announcement, just a slow wash of pale light stretching across the quiet street, touching rooftops, fences, and finally settling on the unfinished shed where everything has changed. Daniel stands beside it already dressed, the metal case now clean enough to reveal its true form. Resting on a small wooden table he placed there before sunrise, Rex sits close by, posture calm but attentive, his eyes moving between Daniel and the case as if still guarding something that no longer needs to be hidden. The neighborhood begins to wake in pieces, a door opens, footsteps on gravel, a car engine turning over, and then, one by one, The same neighbors who once laughed begin to notice something different, not loud, not dramatic, but enough to draw their attention back to the yard they once dismissed. Daniel does not call them over, does not explain. He simply stands there, hands resting lightly at his sides, presence steady, grounded in a way that feels new, or maybe just. Finally visible, Rex rises slowly and steps closer to the table, his nose brushing the edge of the case before he looks up at Daniel. A silent check, a quiet confirmation. Daniel responds with a small nod, then reaches forward and opens the lid fully, not hiding anything this time. The contents laid out clearly in the morning light, the folded flag placed with care, the dog tags resting beside it, the letters set gently on top, everything arranged not for display, but for truth. Across the fence, a man who once laughed now stands still, his arms no longer crossed, his expression uncertain, as if trying to reconcile what he is seeing with what he thought he knew. Another neighbor steps closer, not entering the yard, just enough to see more clearly. Their voices are quiet now, almost hesitant, like they understand without being told that this is not something to interrupt. Daniel does not look at them right away. He keeps his focus on the case, on the items within it, as if giving them the space they were always meant to have. Then slowly, he lifts the second set of dog tags and holds them in the open air, not raising them high, just enough that they catch the light, the metal reflecting a soft glow that feels heavier than it should. The gesture is simple, but it carries more weight than any explanation could. Rex stands beside him, still and steady, his presence filling the space between silence and understanding. The wind moves gently through the yard, lifting the edge of the flag just slightly. A quiet motion that draws every eye without a single word being spoken. And in that moment, something shifts across the fence line. Not loudly, not suddenly, but deeply. The laughter that once filled this space feels distant now, replaced by something quieter, something closer to respect. Daniel lowers the tags back into the case and closes the lid slowly, not hiding it again, just completing the moment. His hands rest on the metal for a brief second before he steps back. Rex follows his movement instinctively, staying close. Always close. Daniel finally lifts his gaze, meeting the eyes of those watching, not with anger, not with pride, just with a calm that does not ask for anything in return. And that is what changes everything. Not the case, not the contents, but the quiet certainty of a man who no longer needs to explain where he has been or what he carries. The street remains still for a moment longer, held in that silence, before life begins to move again, slower this time, more aware. And as Daniel turns away from the shed and walks back toward the house, Rex at his side, the space behind them no longer feels like something broken or unfinished. It feels complete, not because it looks different, but because the truth it holds has finally been seen, and nothing that was buried there will ever be invisible again. The day moves forward, but something in the air remains different, quieter, as if the street itself has learned to listen. Daniel does not return to the shed right away. He lets it stand as it is, the case resting where it was placed, visible but undisturbed, not as a display, but as a truth that no longer needs to be hidden. Rex follows him through the small routines of the morning, each step in sync, each pause shared. The bond between them no longer defined by what was lost, but by what was found. Hours pass, the sun rises higher, and the same neighbors who once watched from a distance now move differently, slower when they pass the fence, quieter in their voices. One of them stops briefly, not stepping into the yard, just standing there with a look that carries something unspoken, something closer to understanding than curiosity. Daniel notices, but he does not acknowledge it with words. He simply nods once, a small gesture, enough to meet the moment without changing it. Because some things do not need conversation, they only need to be seen. Rex settles near the edge of the yard, no longer guarding a single spot, but watching everything with a calm that feels earned, his ears still alert, his presence still strong. But the urgency is gone, replaced by something steady, something complete. As the afternoon light softens and begins to stretch across the ground again, Daniel returns to the shed, not to rebuild it, not to change it, but to finish it in a way that matches what it has become. He adjusts a loose board, secures a corner, not hiding the space beneath, but framing it, giving it shape without taking away its meaning. The structure stands simple, imperfect, but intentional, a quiet marker in a yard that once meant nothing to anyone passing by. Now holding a story no one will forget, Rex moves beside him, watching each motion, then sitting once more near the spot where it all began. Not because he needs to guard it, but because he chooses to stay. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that stretch across the grass and touch the base of the shed, the same place where everything was uncovered. And for a moment, Daniel stands still again, looking at it, not with the weight he carried before, but with something lighter, something steadier, like a man who has finally set something down that he did not know he was still holding. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out his own set of dog tags, the ones he carried all this time, and for a second, he holds them up, beside the place where the case rests, not comparing, not questioning, just acknowledging. Then he lowers them again, slipping them back into his pocket with a quiet certainty. The wind moves gently through the yard, brushing against the wood, carrying the faint sound of leaves shifting somewhere beyond the fence. And in that soft, passing moment, everything feels settled, not finished in the way stories often are, but complete in a way that does not need anything more. Daniel places his hand on Rex's head, fingers resting there for a few seconds longer than usual, a silent thank you that does not need to be spoken, and Rex leans into it just enough to answer, just enough to say he understands. As the last light of day fades and the first hint of evening begins to settle in, the shed stands quiet. The case within reach, the past no longer buried, and the man who built it no longer defined by what others saw, but by what he chose to carry, and what he finally chose to bring back into the light. And somewhere in that stillness, without noise, without announcement, something like grace takes its place, not as a reward, not as a conclusion, but as a quiet reminder that some truths do not need to be spoken to be honored. They only need to be remembered, and sometimes they need a loyal heart. On four paws to lead